Hi, it's Sean in St. Louis from the Marketing Gateway. And boy, have we got another treat for you. I've got a two-part interview with Jolene Sherman. And Jolene is fantastic and interesting for so many reasons. But one of the things that I really enjoy about talking to her is that she was one of my students very recently. I had her in my MBA class for marketing strategy. And I didn't find out until pretty much the end of the class that she had a background in marketing that went really far back, starting out with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, where she rose up to the point where she was managing the internal creative agency there for not just the Post-Dispatch, but for many other holdings within the company that she worked for. And now she is in charge of business development and enterprise solutions for a software company called Fluency, selling products to the very types of people that she used to be, working on the digital marketing side. So I'm so excited to share her story with you and talk a little bit about what we talked about in class and how that maps to a real world experience. You're going to have a blast. She's so fun to listen to. So this is part one of our interview, and here we go. Well, welcome back to the Marketing Gateway. I'm Sean in St. Louis, of course, and with me is Jolene Sherman. And Jolene is someone who I got to know in the weirdest way possible because she was in my class at SIUE in my MBA class, and I had no idea. I was teaching marketing and had no idea that she actually worked in the field and knew quite a bit about it. It was evident, from hearing the things she said in class, but I found out kind of afterwards, and I was like, well, we definitely need to have her on. So Jolene, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I was honored to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump right in. And we always start these by asking you, tell me something surprising that I don't know. It can be anything that you want to share.
Well, I think this surprises most people because, as you mentioned, Sean, I spent 20 years in the marketing field, but my degree is actually in elementary education. And I was a seventh grade science teacher right after I graduated college. I'm an SIUE graduate, which is why it was easy to go back and get my master's there. So most people do not know that. That's usually a bit shocking.
That is definitely one of the things that when we were talking that caught me off guard too, because especially given the way your career progressed, like never expected that. So what
Yeah.
field of science did you teach, by the way?
So in seventh grade, it's a bit of general science, but most of it was chemistry based. So you're talking periodic table experiments, chemical reactions, things of that nature. So, and I taught at a charter school in St. Louis in the kind of downtown area and off of Filer Avenue. And so it was a lot of fun, but we were working with a lot of kitchen chemistry, which is, relatively safe for seventh graders. So
Something you might not know about me is I used to teach Mad Science, which is an after-school science program, and
yeah,
I was Dr. Frankenstein, and I would go in a lab coat and do science experiments
that's
after school with kids.
awesome. Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's the type of science that kids get excited about usually. It's like things are bubbling and different, you're getting different reactions. So yeah, that's a lot of fun.
and every day, are we going to blow something up?
No, we are not.
So you've clearly been in the St. Louis area for a while. How did you come to live and work here?
Yeah, so born and raised, really. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Brighton, Illinois. It's kind of a small farming community, about 45 minutes to an hour outside of St. Louis. So I'm actually an Illinoisan living here on the Illinois side of the river. But yeah, that it's been home. Really never got too far and decided just to kind of stay here in the region. Met my husband. We have two sons now who are 21 and 16. So they're in the later years of being under the roof. But yeah, this is just where we've always remained.
I'm an Illinoisan as well, so I know exactly what you mean. And
Yeah.
I get to work in St. Louis, but then I get to drive across the river and pass the arch every day. So
Yeah, I always joke when people hear, if you say you're from Illinois and you're just talking to people, like if you're traveling or out of state, everyone always assumes Chicago. So yeah, I'm always like, no, St. Louis, because at least that gets you into the Southern Illinois part of the state. And then I would joke driving back and forth to downtown, it's almost like you had to have a passport. Illinoisans will go to St. Louis, but to get St. Louisans to come to Illinois, like, come on, guys, it's friendly over here too. So
it's so true. It's so true.
yeah.
Well, what's something about the St. Louis area that you wish other people knew?
So I mean, growing up here my whole life, and then of course raising my family here, and maybe people do know this, but like St. Louis is such a warm community that gives you a big city uh, experience. So you have, the symphony and the Fox Theater and such an amazing like theater and arts district. Obviously, with all the parks, and then you've got the Cardinals if you're a sports fan, or the Blues. So I always just like to say, like, I think St. Louis really punches above its weight class in what it provides in terms of like an overall experience for families. But you don't have to have like the Chicago or New York traffic. You kind of get the best of both worlds. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the St. Louis area for sure.
As am I. As am I. I always tell people it's one of the greatest values, especially if you have a family, because so many things here are free. So it's just
Absolutely. I
wonderful.
mean, I know we always talk about the zoo, but if you've been to other cities and paid to go to a zoo, you really appreciate what that means to be here in St. Louis and have those, experiences. And Forest Park in general, I mean, is pretty amazing. So yeah.
Agreed. Well, let's jump into talking a little bit about your marketing background. So tell me a little bit about how you got started in a marketing career, because, like you said, you didn't start out planning to have one,
Right.
and you worked at the St. Louis Post Dispatch. So tell me a little bit about how that all worked out.
Yeah, so that's actually also an interesting story. So when I was working on my undergrad, my part-time job, as I was working my way through school, was actually at the Argosy or Alton Bell Casino, for people who may know that. And I had a food and beverage manager who had left to go start her career at the St. Louis Post Dispatch. And so after I graduated college, and was, kind of deciding that education was not going to be my forever path, we had stayed connected, and she called and said, Jolene, you need to come apply. And I'm like, apply for what? And she's like, it's an inside sales job. It's in recruitment advertising. So for our guests who may not know, that's like help wanted ads, right? That's back in the day when you actually put a help wanted ad in the newspaper and said, we're hiring for this position. And I said to my friend, I'm like, I don't have any experience in sales. I'm a seventh grade science teacher who's trying to kind of figure it out. And she's like, just trust me. She's like, you were always great with customers in the restaurant. Like, come in and interview. And I like to say, kind of the rest is history. I had my interview. I started working at the St. Louis Post Dispatch in advertising and sales in 2005. And of course, 20 years later, kind of built a career there. So it's kind of an interesting start, which was on the advertising and sales side of kind of the marketing sphere, is where I got my opportunity to grow my marketing career and advertising career. So
And it's funny because I started out, my original career field was journalism, so I would have loved to have worked at the St. Louis Post Dispatch. that career went nowhere for me. So it's funny that
yeah.
you kind of lucked into working there, of course, on the marketing side. But
Yeah, no, but Sean, you're right. I
Mhm.
mean, having grown up in a small community, and even though, Edwardsville wasn't, we're talking in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was there for my undergrad, it wasn't quite what I think people know of Edwardsville today, right? It's grown up so much. And so like when I got that job in downtown St. Louis at the Post Dispatch, I really felt like I had arrived. I always joked I felt like Sarah Jessica Parker in like Sex and the City. It was like, oh my gosh, here I am. But you're right, and the way that the Post Dispatch was organized back then, which was really cool, is you had your editorial and journalism team was on 5, and then the 6th floor was advertising. And there really is a separation of church and state, as there should be in fair, equitable journalism. But it was so cool to be on the elevator with some of those columnists, and just the names that people knew in St. Louis. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm here on the elevator with you. So yeah, I hear you. It was a really awesome and enlightening experience, especially for someone in her early 20s trying to figure it all out. So
Definitely. Well, working for a newspaper on the advertising side for as long as you did must have been fascinating in other ways too. So tell me a little bit about what things looked like when you started and what sort of work you were doing. So you're doing help wanted ads. Did they move you into anything else as time went on?
yeah, they did. So the way that we were structured there is, and probably people are familiar with this, but you kind of have an inside sales team and an outside sales team. So I started in inside sales. That's pretty common. Moved into outside sales, but still within, recruitment advertising. But I was working with kind of larger companies in St. Louis, helping them, with a little bit more of a strategic path to helping to recruit and find, more long-term, employees. And then I was asked to join our online digital team. So, and I started working then at that point in more of a retail environment. So instead of being focused on help wanted ads, I was really focused on kind of advertising in general. So working more with small businesses and medium sized businesses to advertise products and services, but with the lens of digital. That was back when there was still like Yahoo. And we had like Yahoo behavioral targeting ads, which was like the first of programmatic and really like targeting where everyone was like, wait a second, this is creepy. You know, you can follow me around and serve me messaging. And I just laugh because I think, oh my gosh, like what we thought was creepy 18 years ago, man, has that changed now? So that's just kind of how I evolved, and then was very, very fortunate to work within the St. Louis Post-Dispatch at what I would call a startup within an organization. We started Amplify Digital, which was really focused then on kind of full service digital marketing outside of just what the Post-Dispatch could offer, but really expanding into more of your Google search, and of course what we've seen happen with Meta and all of that. So it really became full service, and it just sort of grew and expanded as the technologies and the solutions evolved. The organization really was investing in making sure that we could take those same solutions to those small businesses that had been traditional customers of the paper.
So when you were transitioning into this digital role, I mean, I'm going to guess, based on the time frame you mentioned, like Facebook was probably new, if even around, and iPhones were probably just getting started, and
Oh yeah.
a lot changed over time. So
Oh yeah. Oh
what
yeah.
what did the original world look like? Like you said, Yahoo was something that you guys were using. Was there anything
Yeah.
else that was really different then than today?
You probably remember Monster, like
Hmm.
job postings. Like that was really that was like, if I go back, it was like people were, you had your print ad, right? That you still like the Sunday paper where you would look for help wanted ads. And it was a big deal. We were helping people to upsell people into Monster. And it was like, what do you mean this online job board, right? So that was something that was really, kind of new and interesting, and kind of, for some people, even our customers, they're like, what? No one's ever going to look for a job online. And it's like, well, yeah, it's probably here to stay, right? Hindsight always being 2020. But one of the things I laugh about when you were just saying that, like Facebook and iPhone, like we were required in digital, like when you join the digital sales team or marketing team, you were required to have a Facebook page and an iPhone, because there's like, how could you be out kind of talking about it and selling it? And I remember being, even myself, so resistant to that. Like I was like, I'm fine with the phone I have. I don't want everybody to know everything about me on Facebook. Like, and I just like giggle. Like when you just said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember my boss telling me, and of course he's a dear friend, but he's like, don't make me fire you because you won't get a Facebook page. And I'm like, fine, I'll get a Facebook page, So it's just like, it's crazy to think about that. And like, just even how short of a window of time, Sean, that was. I mean, that hasn't been that long ago. So, I mean, in the history of the world.
I, when I started here at RPG, I remember I got my first BlackBerry, and
Yeah.
that was before iPhones. And
Yeah.
I got a Facebook profile and was telling everybody else here they should have one, and they were all looking at me like I was crazy. And now I don't even have Facebook. I've
Right.
aged out of it. I don't want to be a part of it anymore because it
Yeah.
just feels like I'm too young to be there or something. But
Yes,
it's
exactly.
I've aged out in the reverse direction. It's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of change has happened in that time. My son and I were watching The Simpsons, and Homer Simpson it's one of the older episodes. Homer Simpson's looking at the wanted ads in the paper trying to find a new job, and
Yeah.
I had to explain to my son, like, you wouldn't do that anymore. Like there's no paper
Right.
to go look at
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that kind of
And
job. So
I hit, of course, when I started in 2005, of course, that was, just a few years before the Great Recession, which really transformed a lot of industry for a lot of reasons. But on Fridays, we would joke, like, you didn't even go to lunch. You barely, because you were just typing kind of as quickly as you could to get those ads into the paper, because, there was a deadline. That's a real thing. Like, a newspaper isn't on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like the internet is, right? So you were feverishly working to get those ads into the paper, because that was important for businesses, so that on Sunday when people were looking, their job posting would be there. So yeah, it's I don't feel that old, but man, when you talk about it, it's like, oh my gosh, that's, feels like a lifetime ago.
well, I know when I've talked with you, you eventually rose to a position where you were leading this large internal advertising agency, but you were also facing this really different media buying landscape than anybody had ever seen before. So you rose to this position of prominence, but also like you had challenges nobody before you had ever had to face, right? And of course,
Yes.
Post Dispatch was changing too, right? It was shrinking the size of the paper. It was they both took out some of the pages and then literally shrunk the paper down to a smaller size.
Correct.
And
Yep.
then
Absolutely.
they cut editions out. I know recently they just stopped publishing a Monday paper. So so many things have changed, right, over time. The website's changed a lot too. So tell me a little bit about what was this internal agency that you were running, and how did you adapt to these changes? How did you meet these challenges without anybody that really could advise you on what to do?
Right. Yeah. And it was, that's a great way to put it. It's like, you're learning as you go, and that cliche, you don't know what you don't know. Um, One of the things I do think, and I would remind, the teams that worked for me, or even my colleagues, is if you just take like one step back and kind of really think about kind of marketing at its core, advertising, as a division of marketing at its core, it's you're always trying to reach, the right person at the right time. And, it wasn't, that newspaper or even radio or television all of a sudden became, less relevant. It's just that all of these other channels and, ways in which you could reach people and get, their attention were popping up. Like we talk about, Facebook, the internet in general. I mean, it just really, diluted, for lack of a better term, any one major medium. And so, what I would try to remind my teams, and as we were growing and trying to kind of keep up in real time, we always would laugh. It's like, have you ever changed a tire as you're going 70 miles an hour down the highway? Like, you couldn't just stop and say, well, we need to completely restructure our business. Like, that wasn't an option. And it's probably not an option in any industry, but especially wasn't in ours. But it's like just the reminder that, hey, look, we're still ultimately at our core trying to find the right audience. So that audience used to be, we used to have kind of the monopoly on that audience, but now people are getting their news and information from different places, or even if they're still getting it from us, they're fact checking it in other ways. They're using social media, they're engaging or even getting to our information in different ways. And so really that just was kind of the core message, which was, let's keep an eye to the ultimate goal of get the right audience for our advertisers, because they're giving us their hard-earned dollars and we need to deliver a result for them that's going to help them sell more products, sell more service. And not get too fixated, I guess, on any one new technology or medium. And just remember, like, that audience can be in multiple different places. Let's find that path, like we studied in class on the journey mapping. Like, but you just had to really take a step back and say, let's not lose sight of what the core goal is here. But let's just make sure that we're thinking about where those eyeballs are, and they're different, and that was really the biggest thing. And, easier said than done, because you're trying to keep up and you're trying to make sure you have all the right solutions. And you've probably, known this in your career when you're talking to different clients. Like, sometimes people can get fixated on like a new idea and they think it's going to be the silver bullet to fit, it's going to be the thing that's going to solve all of their problems. So that was really the core messaging was, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's still an amazing audience that reads the paper, that cares. They're just consuming it in different ways, and they're going different places. So let's make sure that we can kind of follow them and find them to deliver that ultimate, end goal for our advertisers. In the case of the clients of the agency, so.
Now, when you were in charge of this agency, you weren't just doing help wanted kind of stuff anymore. You were doing all kinds of other digital advertising too, right?
Correct. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So at that point, when we were growing Amplified Digital, which is still a wonderful agency today, it's robust and still growing. We were focused on really servicing any client. We worked with small businesses, we worked with medium-sized businesses, we even worked with regional businesses. We weren't really an agency that was going to work with your big box stores or brands, right? That's not where we wanted to, that wasn't our niche. We were really focused on, kind of that newspaper client, a community aspect of helping these advertisers grow. But yeah, we helped with everything from, we can build your website, we can get you set up on social, organic social, kind of your earned media, as well as obviously paid media in any of the channels. So certainly through our own distribution, that, like you said, the newspaper.com websites, as well as the printed editions. But then of course within Google, Meta, all of your other channels, both those walled gardens, as well as just the open web, through different programmatic buying networks, the trade desk, et cetera. So yeah, we really grew over time to make sure that we could kind of offer that, what we would call omni-channel, holistic, full service approach. And then the agency grew to a point where we had started by just sort of servicing those St. Louis clients, but then ultimately we were supporting clients, across the country, because Lee Enterprises is the owner of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, has 70 markets across the U.S. And so we took those same services and really expanded. So at that point, we were nationwide.
And when the kind of people you were serving, I mean, they were small business owners or mid-sized regional business owners. Were you dealing with the business owners themselves, or were you dealing with like marketing managers, or what did that typical client look like?
Yeah, I mean, it really varied. I mean, and that was kind of a challenge, both an exciting challenge, but a challenge because, in some cases we were working with the business owner, and I remember early in my career, as we were launching the agency and these different solutions, you'd be literally sitting in you're in the lobby and this is a business owner that's dealing with their own customers and their own day to day. And you're trying to get it, hey, just, do you have a second, so there was a lot of that, but then yes, some of the larger, more regional sized businesses within St. Louis, they have their marketing teams, and then you are really working with a marketing manager, potentially a marketing director, or even a CMO in some cases, to help kind of help them support their strategy. And in that particular case, if you were working with a CMO, you might be dealing more with like a facet of their business, like, hey, help us with this particular, we want to run this digital marketing. Can you help us with this piece of it? You wouldn't maybe have the whole pie. Whereas if you were working with a smaller business owner, usually we were servicing as their full service agency, just for ease of their day to day, and also smaller budgets. There's that only can stretch so far. So.
And digital marketing has changed a lot over the years. I imagine earlier it was probably just mainly banner ads and things like that.
Yeah.
What are some of the types of content that you were creating?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, in the beginning it was largely banner ads. We started to get, relatively sophisticated, obviously video, right? I mean, and video maybe doesn't sound so sophisticated, but when you're just thinking about the way in which, the generation, especially of the future, likes to engage with content, that content strategy was so crucial. So, it's kind of the same way I say, take a step back and think about, where your audience is, take a step back and think about what is it that you really want to say, and then think about the medium in which you want to present it, right? And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that's really intriguing, and you may have seen an article that's just been released recently, is that ChatGPT is now hiring, massive sort of hiring on, technologists to come in and help sort of build an ad ecosystem for ChatGPT. So if you just think about all the way, I mean, so that's like a whole nother can of worms. But when you talk about digital marketing, it really is. It's like, well, wherever a set of human eyeballs is engaging with content digitally, you have to have the right messaging and the right format and the right medium to catch their attention. And so, yeah, that's a whole nother thing I'm kind of excited to watch, and see, like, what's that going to look like, and what's that ad environment going to look like, and how are we as consumers and users of these like AI platforms going to respond if it starts to look a lot more like a Google feed than a prompt situation. So yeah, we'll see.
Especially since ChatGPT just kind of got they launched a promotional campaign that kind of highlighted things that didn't look very high tech, and it
Yeah.
made a lot of people kind of put off by what their agency had
Yeah.
created for them. So it seems like maybe they're trying to pivot to do something a little bit different from what they have been doing, because so far this year they have proven not to be very savvy in the field of marketing for sure.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. And then you look at some of the other, channels, like Perplexity and
Mhm.
Claude and, obviously Gemini through Google. But I think, it's like if you go back, that one of the things I actually love about marketing, and I don't know if you feel this way, it's like as much as things change, and they do, the core principle really doesn't, right? And so these platforms that are growing these massive audiences, it's like, how do you monetize it? It's that's the, it's like, how did newspaper monetize its content? Well, you put an ad in the paper and it went out to, hundreds of thousands of people and readers. It's that same concept around sort of advertising and marketing that really conceptually doesn't change. It's just where those eyeballs go, and then everybody who has the eyeballs, they grow that audience. Next natural thing is, how am I going to monetize it? Will it be subscription based? Will it be advertising based? Or will it be both? And what we've seen is a lot of times it's both, right? So
In the current landscape of newspapers, and I know you're not working at the Post-Dispatch anymore, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but do you feel like they're going to just completely shift to digital at some point and away from print, or what do you see as the future?
yeah, that's an interesting question. Some of us would have predicted, and I might have even fallen into that, that print would have never lasted as long as it has. But there's still a base of readers in St. Louis, and certainly I think, we would all presume, okay, well, that's an older demographic. And yes, certainly there is, but there's even some folks that are, kind of on the other end of that spectrum, that still want a printed paper. That's how there's something nostalgic about that for them. So, do I think print will be around forever? No, I don't. I could see it going to something a little bit more, like infrequent, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's still a Sunday paper, right? And wouldn't presume to know, when that would look like or
Sure.
predict what that would look like. But I definitely think that we just have to meet readers where they are. And that's one of the things that I did always think was really strong about kind of the Lee Enterprise strategy and the Post Dispatch strategy, was like, let's not get too fixated on how the news gets out. Let's concentrate on the news. And I think, that's something that I would, you know, not that anyone cares what I think, but if I had to give any recommendation to news organizations across the country, don't get too fixated on how you're getting it out. Like, make good content and then find the people, like in whatever medium they want to consume it. Because, that's really, I think, for for our country, for journalism, for free press, like, that's the important part, is let's make sure we have good, credible news, and then get it into the hands of people, whether they want to still pick up that paper, or like most of us, like, it's just as easy to do it here, so.
Right. I subscribe to several citizen journalists that are formerly professional journalists that are now running Substacks, for example.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Let me ask you, before I transition to talking about your new role, what
Yeah.
achievements are you proudest of during your career at the Post Dispatch?
Oh, wow. Um, so that's always a tough question for me, probably because, if you've grown up here, you're like Midwest nice and Midwest humble, right? I will say, well, I'll talk about one thing that I'm really proud of, and it's kind of inherent to who I am, is I always want to learn, and I always want to do something new and different, and I'm by nature a fixer. And so what I say that is, like, it kind of made for uh a great environment for me being in the newspaper media, for 20 years, because there was always something new that we could do. There was always something we could tinker and fix. There was always a new product or a new solution or a new go-to-market strategy. And that really just naturally fit kind of who I am. So I would say that I am proud that I kind of kept that mantra. Even, I mean, and look, plenty of things that I did or launched didn't always work. And that's what I would tell any, younger me or anyone who's coming up into the workforce, is it's like, it's okay to fail. Like, just do it fast. We always say, like, if you're going to fail fast, learn from it, move on, and pivot. So I'm really proud of that. That, I think, leads into, the growth of Amplified Digital. And there was an amazing team of people. So I never want to be like, I did it all, because that's completely not true. But having the responsibility of kind of leading the group, I was really proud of the growth, because we went from like $2.5 million in agency sales to, when I was leaving the company, $100 million in agency sales. And that's a lot of growth in kind of a short window of time, relatively speaking, in a challenged industry with a lot of competition. So I think it's that kind of first, part that I'm most proud of, which is grow, learn, fail, move forward, Don't fall in love with your own ideas, you know, like because tomorrow they're going to be old and antiquated, and be open to new ones. And that really did lead, I think, to the growth. And like I said, a lot of amazing people who were part of that team, who certainly deserve the credit, probably more so than I do, but definitely things that I'm proud of in that tenure.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview, and we're going to have part two up in a couple of days. We're going to talk a lot more about how things have changed, what Jolene is up to now, and of course, we're going to talk about what we covered in my class, and she's going to tell you about something really exciting that she and her classmates stumbled on that could change the future of Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies. You're going to love it. So we'll see you there.